every temptation is an opportunity to do good. James 1 verse 12 says, "Blessed is a man who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him." Temptation in itself is not weakness. Every person who has ever lived, including Jesus, has experienced temptation. Temptation is rather an opportunity to choose good instead of sin. Temptation presents a choice, and whenever we choose God over sin, we grow in the character of Christ. How does temptation work? We think temptation lies around us, but God says it begins within us. James 1 verse 14 to 15 says, "Each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death." Temptation is a process that starts with desire and is then twisted by Satan into disobedience. So, how do we overcome temptation? Well, first we can refuse to be intimidated. In one sense, we can even consider a temptation to be a compliment. Satan does not have to tempt those who are already living in sin. They are already his. So, when we are tempted, it means that Satan sees our faith as a threat and is trying to sway us from choosing good. Second, we recognize our pattern of temptation and learn to prepare for it. There are certain situations that make us more vulnerable to temptation than others. We need to ask ourselves, when am I most tempted? And plan for those times. Wise planning reduces temptation. And third, and most important, we can ask God's help. God wants us to call on Him for help in times of temptation. Psalm 50 verse 15 says, "Call on me in times of trouble. I will rescue you, and you will honor me." Too often we do not turn to God because we either do not want to, or we are too embarrassed from giving in to sin so many times. But God never gets irritated or impatient when we come to Him with our temptation. His love is everlasting, and His patience endures forever. And He will always be right beside us during temptation. We simply need to choose Him. Every temptation is an opportunity to do good. Remember James 1 verse 12 that says, "Blessed is a man who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love Him." So ask yourself, what temptations do I face in everyday life, and how can I call on God to help me defeat them?